Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello, welcome again to our discussion of poetry and its tributaries. I don't need to extensively recall what we did in the previous class, you very well remember it. Nevertheless, very quickly if we can recall, we discussed how difficult it is to classify poetry into different types. Nevertheless, for practical purposes, why we need to classify them, and as part of that we were discussing sonnets and haikus, and how some categories pose problems such as prose poetry and visual poetry. So, in this class we are going to continue our discussion of subtypes of poetry. After learning about sonnets and haikus, let us see what more subtypes there are to poetry and how to identify them. Okay. So, here we have limerick. Limerick is a very popular subtype of poetry. In fact, limericks are something that children enjoy a lot, So, as a genre of poetry, limericks have the capacity to tickle your funny bone, and again, like haiku, they too are quite short ones, generally speaking. They have a very distinct verbal rhythm, in the sense they make use of rhyme and rhythm in such a way that they bring out a humorous aspect of a thing. So, even here there are generally 5 lines. Normally speaking, the last line is considered a kind of a punch line. So, that is going to create an ambience of humor when you read it. Though it is not very strictly, in terms of rhyme scheme, generally it is said that it follows a rhyme scheme of A, B, B, A. We have already identified how to mark rhyme schemes in a poem, but there are exceptions to this. But for time being, yes, we can say it's limerick is a genre of poetry that makes use of 5 lines, and it's generally very humorous. Let us take a look at a couple of popular ones. So, Roger Godin's limerick is a kind of a limerick on limericks. The limerick packs laughs anatomical into space that's quite economical, but the good ones I have seen so seldom are clean, and the clean ones so seldom are comical. Again, here you can see A, B, B, A, the rhyme scheme A, B, B, A. And we have another one by Edward Lear, a very well known writer. There was an old man with a beard who said, "It's just as I feared. 2 owls and a hen, 4 larks and a wren have all built their nests in my beard." Again, they follow the rhyme schema of A, B, B, A. So, a genre that's very popular with kids because they find it really amusing. So, for anybody who has a great taste in humorous poetry, limerick is for them. From limericks, let us go on to free verse. Free verse is a type of poetry which has now come to occupy a very important place in the world of poetry, because it is a kind of a radical shift in the way poetry is generally composed. Here, unlike other types of poetry, other genres of poetry, there are literally no rules. You can write it in any way you want it. It's in that sense truly global. Earlier, of course, even to this day, many uninitiated readers think that poetry means it should rhyme. Not necessarily. As long as there is a kind of working rhythm that lends that particular poem a musical quality, as long as it imitates the inherent rhythm of language in a beautiful way, then it need not rhyme at all. So, free verse in that sense is one of the most popular styles of modern poetry. So, here, as we said earlier, you have absolute freedom when it comes to writing a poem. There is nothing like you have to have a particular rhyme scheme. It does not even follow that you need to write your poem using stanzas of particular length. No, if you wish, you can begin with a quatrain, you can end with a sestet, and in between you can pack or you can almost insert a couplet, something like that. So, what am I trying to say here? Here the poet has a total autonomy as far as this particular type of poetry is concerned. So, therefore, you can have as many stanzas as you want, and each stanza can be of varying length. It is absolutely up to you. It is absolutely up to you. Having said that, we have to keep in mind that this is something very difficult. The practitioners of free verse would tell you how difficult it is. Nevertheless, of course, we can begin from somewhere. If this is a form that you like a lot, then you can begin expressing yourself in free verse. In fact, poems of Eliot, Yeats to a certain extent, these are modernist writers. Most of the modernist writers preferred this particular type of poetry, free verse. And the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock is a remarkable poem that belongs to free verse category. Just to have a taste of that well known poem. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. Now look at it, of course, there is no rhyme pattern and there is no stanza here. And even if you look at the other stanzas in the poem, they are of different lengths. Nevertheless, it is an extraordinary poem. It is a remarkable poem that has had its influence on other modernist and postmodernist poets. From free verse, let us go to acrostic. This is another slightly difficult type of poetry, and acrostic poetry has its roots in the Middle Ages. Earlier this was a type of poetry that was preferred a lot for various reasons. So, what does an acrostic poem do, or how does an acrostic poem look like? So, here now look at this. The first letter of each line is significant. In an acrostic poem, the first letter of each line is significant because either that reveals to you the name of the poet or the title of the poem. So, if you look at that, if you look at the first letter of all the lines, so you get the title of this Rainstorm. That is the title of the poem, right. Therefore, you can call acrostic that kind of a poem where certain letters in each line, they spell out a word or a phrase that is generally related to the poet or the title of that particular poem. Because of this, you can call it, it's a highly constrained form of writing, because you need to think a lot, because you have to start a line with a particular letter, otherwise you don't get to practice this form at all. Therefore, you have to work under a lot of pressure. So, earlier acrostic poetry was used as a mnemonic device to aid memory retrieval. So, in fact, in one of the earlier classes we discussed mnemonic poetry, right? How with the help of poetry certain concepts, certain things, and in many cases secrets too, were passed on from person to person, generation to generation. So, acrostic poetry is a form of mnemonic poetry. So, they help you memorize a thing. So, that is how you get an acrostic one. So, that is where you need to make use of the first line in a very careful and a calibrated way. So, because they first appeared in during the medieval times, they form a major chunk of medieval literature, and as I said, this form of poetry is used in order to bring out the name of the poet or the patron who may have helped the poet in some way or the other, or it may even refer to the god. So, it may even be made use of in a prayer. So, these are the various places where acrostic poetry is made use of. From acrostic poetry, let us go to elegy. Again, elegy is one of the most it is one of the oldest types of poetry, we can say it. Elegies are generally called poems of lamentation, sad songs. Elegy is generally a sad song, and the term elegy itself has Greek origin, which means to cry, to lament. So, you write an elegy when you have lost someone you have loved, when you have lost someone to the grave, and as a mode of recalling your love, as a mode of recalling the equation you have had with the person, you write it. It is in a way dedicated to the person who is no longer with you. It is a way of recalling their friendship, recalling your equation with that person. Because of this, you can call elegy a serious kind of poetry, unlike limerick. You can, if limerick tries to bring out the funny bone, elegy brings out a sad dimension of human life. Therefore, you can call them serious reflections of life and death. They seriously reflect on the questions of life and death, especially death. So, if you look at an elegy, generally speaking, there are three parts to it. In fact, these three parts are not necessarily put in the form of three stanzas. It does not work out that way, but there are if you look at these three parts are evident if you look at the content of the poem. The first part deals with grief, how the person is under the grips of inconsolable grief with the demise of the person closest to them. And then comes praise of the deceased, how the person who is no longer with you was very close to you, his or her virtues and all that. And the third part is consolation, how do you come to terms with grief, because you can't go on grieving forever. You have to come to terms with grief and try to move on. So, that moving on part is there in the third part. So, that is elegy for us. Here is an example or an illustration of elegy. It is called epitaph. There is also another subtype of poetry called epitaph, but of course, here the title of the poem is Epitaph. It is by Catherine Phillips elegy. Read the poem in order to understand its mood and see if you can spot the three stages in which elegy is developed. The first one is mourning, grief. The second stage is praising the person, and the third is coming to terms with that grief, consolation, consoling oneself and trying to move on. What on earth deserves our trust? Youth and beauty both are dust. What on earth deserves our trust? Youth and beauty both are dust. Long we gathering or we with pain. What one moment calls again? 7 years childless marriage past. A son is born at last. So exactly limid and fair, full of good spirits, mean and air, as long as life promised, yet in less than 6 weeks dead. Too promising, too great a mind in so small room to be confined. Therefore, as fit in heaven to dwell, he quickly broke the prison shell. So the subtle alchemist can't with Hermes' seal resist the powerful spirit's subtler flight, but it will bid him long good night. And so the sun, if it arise, half so glorious as his eyes, like this infant, takes a shroud, buries in a morning cloud. So the first part deals with grief. The second part, too promising and onwards until the last 4-5 lines, it deals with praising, and then the last 4-5 lines discuss how the poet consoles, how the poetic persona consoles here. Epitaph for us. From elegy we move to ballad. Again, ballad is perhaps the oldest of the poetic form that we have. In fact, even our epics, part of our epics are borrowed from, are built out of ballads, you can say. So, if you want to use poetry to convey a story, or if you have a narrative and you wish to convey that narrative using poetry or using verse, then ballad is the right form for you, because the focus of ballad is to narrate. It tells you a story using very simple language. Of course, there is no scope for ornamentation here. Using simple rhyme, using simple diction, it narrates a beautiful story. The emphasis here is, of course, on building the story. Generally speaking, the story could be a romantic one, it could be a humorous one, it could be a heroic one or an adventurous one, but it's a story. Generally, if you read it, it follows a particular beat. If you read the lines, you follow a particular beat, and there is a rhyming scheme of ABAB or ABCB. Not a very rigid structure in terms of rhymes are concerned, but one of the most popular ones for anybody interested in conveying a narrative, in conveying a story using the form of verse. So, let us take a quick look at a very important poem that belongs to this genre, the rhyme of the ancient mariner. So, this is written by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, one of the major poets, a close friend of Wordsworth. Almost a kind of a classic ballad that's read across the world. So, this is an excerpt from there, these two stanzas are an excerpt from there. Look at how, using simple language, the poet tries to narrate a story here. It's an ancient mariner, and he stops one of three. By thy long grey beard and glittering eye, now wherefore stops you me? So, he is an ancient mariner. So, it's an occasion, maybe marriage. So, he is standing there and people want to move in, but right at the entrance he stops one of the three who is about to enter, and therefore one of them asks, why are you stopping me? The bridegroom's doors are opened wide and I am next of kin, so why do you want to stop me? So, then the mariner narrates why he has stopped this guest. The guests are met, the feast is set, may you hear the merry din. He holds him with a skinny hand. There was a ship, quoth he. He begins narrating the story. There was a ship. Hold off, unhand me, greybeard loon. Eftsoons his hand dropped he. So it goes on like this. In fact, this is where you come across this famous line, water, water everywhere and not a drop to drink. In fact, it's one of the most oft quoted lines that you can come across, in order to describe the earth, how it is surrounded by 3/4 of water, but not all of it is fit for drinking. Water, water everywhere and not a drop to drink. A very well known ballad, the rhyme of the ancient mariner. From ballad, we move on to an Italian genre of poetry called villanelle. Of course, it has its origins in Italy, especially during the Renaissance time. However, it is popular even in even to this day, and especially in England. So it acquired a kind of a fame during the late 18th century, but this is one of the popular forms that's being used even to this day. Generally speaking, it is highly rigid in terms of its characteristic features and rules. It's a slightly rigid and a difficult form to follow. I said it's Italian, so it has an Italian root, which means in villano, it means peasant in Italian. It's a 19-line poem. It has 5 stanzas, and each stanza is 3 lines. In other words, a tercet, you make use of 5 terzets here, and the closing stanza is a quatrain, a 4-line stanza. That means 5 3s are 15. The last stanza is 4 lines. 15 plus 4, 19 lines. And it also is it has a close rhyming scheme, ABA, ABA. In other words, there are just 2 sounds. It makes use of 2 sounds, A and B. So it's a kind of a permutation and combination of AB sounds, just 2 sounds. That's why I said it's one of the slightly difficult type of poetry. Along with these things, a villanelle must also have 2 refrains. Refrain in poetry is a repetition. Refrain is a repeating line. So you have to have 2 lines that keep occurring at certain intervals. So 2 lines that need to repeat themselves. So these are some things that you will have to keep in mind. So 2 refrains and a rigid rhyme scheme, ABA, ABA, and ABAA in the last stanza, and you have 5 terzets and 1 quatrain, total 19 lines. Let's take a look at one of the extraordinary, remarkable villanelle written by Dylan Thomas, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night. This poem has acquired an iconic status. Look at again, let's see whether it fits into the bill of villanelle. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stanzas of 3 lines each. That means 5 terzets, and the last one, the poem ends with a quatrain, 4 lines. So that means it has 19 lines. Now let's see whether it matches the rhyming rule. So night, T, the sound is T, 1 sound. Day, A, okay, the sound is B. So A, B. Night and light, A, B. Right and night, again the sound T, A. Day is B. So something like this. So ABA, ABA, all that, and even the last quatrain, AB, AA. So, it perfectly fits into that. Do not go gentle into that good night. I mean, the poem is highly, allusive. Here, night refers to night, darkness, images related to them, they refer to death. Light, bright, green, all these things, they refer to life, vitality of life. So, the poem is, the poem beautifully juxtaposes, these contrasting images of light and darkness, beautifully juxtaposes. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of the day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had folk no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Now look at, do not go gentle into that good night, that acts as a refrain. Look at the 6th line, do not go gentle into the good night, and then of course you have the 12th line, do not go gentle into the good night, and even you have even in the last but one line, do not go gentle into the good night. See, that's one line that keeps repeating, so it's a refrain. And rage, rage against the dying of the light, that also is another refrain. So it also meets that criteria. There are 2 refrains here, 2 lines that keep repeating at certain intervals. Rage, rage against the dying of the light, it's again there on 9th line, and it's again there on 15th line, and it's also there on the 19th line. Wild men who caught and sang in the sun in flight and learned too late, they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. The poem goes on this way. In fact, the poem is written in the context of the poet's father. In fact, it's said that his father was not very well. So Dillon Thomas, he was very apprehensive that he may lose his father. So in that fit of emotion, he writes it and almost urges his father to fight against death. Though he knows very well that death is inevitable, do not meekly surrender, before there is at least put up one last fight before you die, before you give up easily, put up one last fight. So here is again, it's very heroic, because it again talks about that existential conflict, conflict between life and death, how mortal beings, we try to fight against death, and ultimately realizing it's not in our hands, we will have to come to terms with it and all that, But here his concern is, do not give up so easily, fight, put up one last fight before you go, something like this. An extraordinary, an exemplary poem. So we have ode, another very interesting type of poetry. Ode, it is said that it originated in ancient Greece, but later we have odes in English, in India. So it, as a form of poetry, as a type of poetry, it's found all across the globe now. So it has traveled across the globe. Here the poetic persona addresses anybody. In fact, how do you know it is an ode? Here there is a direct addressing, O west wind. In fact, ode to west wind is one of the well known odes, ode to Nightingale, all these are well known, these are romantic poets, Keats, Shelley, we are talking about them. So they directly address, whether it's a person, whether it's a thing, whether it's an event, a bird, anything, they address that particular object directly in the poem and start, they construct the poem around it. Generally it has a kind of an elevated tone or an exalted tone, very serious in nature. It explores generally, themes of nature, universal elements and all that. So it makes use of powerful emotions, and in English literature, in English poetry, Shelley and Keats have almost perfected this type of poetry. They have practiced it to almost its perfection. So this excerpt is taken from Shelley's well-known Ode to the West Wind. Oh, wild west wind. So look at how the poet addresses west wind. He is directly addressing west wind. Thou breath of autumn's being, you are the breath of autumn's being, you from whose unseen presence the leaves dead are driven, like ghost from an enchanter fleeing. Wild spirit, which art moving everywhere, destroyer and preserver, hear, oh hear. He wants the west wind to listen to him. He is addressing it, he is describing it, he is interacting with the west wind, and he is calling it wild spirit. In fact, this is a poem where you come across these almost immortal lines. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? These lines are called, they are the epitome of positivity. They are the epitome of hope, eternal human hope. If winter comes, if difficulties are there, can spring be far behind? Can happiness be far behind? It must be somewhere around the corner. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? It's like these lines are the pinnacle of human hope. They depict the pinnacle of human hope. So from here we have epic. We have discussed epics, especially while we were dealing with origins of poetry. Some of the well-known epics are the Ramayana, Mahabharata, Epic of Gilgamesh, Odyssey, and Kalevala. It's a national Finnish epic, Kalevala. Generally, these are narrative poems. They have an omniscient narrator, the narrator who knows everything, omniscient narration. And as if he knows everything, the poet or the narrator narrates things. And here everything is grand in tone, grand in scale, grand in style. These are some kind of epic battles between titans and gods. So everything is taken on an epic scale. These are some of the popular epics. So these are some major forms of poems that we need to know, major subtypes of poem. So I hope this class has helped you identify major types of poetry, how to mark rhyme schemes, and maybe given an option you would be able to identify a poem, you would be able to mark the correct rhyme scheme. So in the next class we might have an activity based on this. Until then, take care and read a couple of poems and see if you can identify the stanza structure, if you can identify the type of poetry and the imagery used and all that. So until the next class, all the best. Take care. Bye bye.